You are sitting in a cabin right now that was engineered to keep you alive, and almost nobody on the plane knows how any of it actually works. Look around you. Those triangles on the wall, the lights near the floor, the oxygen mask dangling from the ceiling, the position they tell you to assume before impact. Every single one of them has a specific, deliberate, sometimes deeply unsettling reason for existing, and the full story behind most of them never makes it into the safety briefing. So here is what this video is. It is a complete breakdown of the survival engineering hiding in plain sight on every commercial flight you have ever taken. Not the surface-level stuff you have already heard. The actual mechanics, the crash data behind the decisions, and a couple of things that are going to genuinely change how you look at the next plane you board. I have spent a lot of time going deep on aviation safety research, FAA certification records, and accident investigation reports to pull this together. So by the end of this, you are going to understand your cabin in a way that most pilots' passengers never do. We are going to cover the brace position, the 90-second rule, and the uncomfortable truth buried inside it. The black triangles, the oxygen masks, the floor lighting, the wing hardware almost nobody knows about, and one cockpit feature that is so specific and so wild that I am saving it for last, because once you hear it, you will not be able to unsee it every time you fly. Let's get into it. The brace position first, because this one has a misconception baked into it that almost everyone gets wrong. Most people assume the brace position is there to protect you from the crash itself, like it is cushioning the impact. It is not. Analysis of the injuries sustained in the 1989 crash of British Midland Flight 92 showed that many of them had been caused by passengers' legs flailing against seatbacks and luggage restraint bars. What the brace position is actually doing is preventing what investigators call secondary impact, which is your body continuing to travel forward after the initial jolt and slamming into the seat in front of you. The crash itself is not what kills most survivors. It is the uncontrolled movement that happens in the half-second after. And here is where it gets really specific. A particularly memorable 1989 air disaster, in which 47 of those aboard died and 74 were injured, prompted recommendation of changes to the then prescribed brace position. Analysis of the Kegworth crash showed that many injuries had been caused by passengers' legs flailing against seatbacks, and that certain small changes to the position would reduce those traumas. The modified brace position requires passengers to keep their feet further back than their knees as they bend the upper portion of their bodies forward, and to wear their seatbelts as tight and as low on their torsos as they can. Following a half-decade of research, one team concluded that passengers failed to adopt the brace position correctly, resulting in many injuries, and their suggestion of a different brace position had been adopted by all UK airlines by 1989. The position you are shown in every safety card is not a generic safety gesture. It is the direct result of one specific crash, one specific injury pattern, and years of post-accident biomechanical research. That is the level of precision that went into it. Now, those black triangles above certain windows. You have probably seen them and never given them a second thought. They look decorative. They are absolutely not. Those triangles are a targeting system, and they exist for one very specific person: the ground inspector walking around the aircraft before a flight. The triangles are positioned so that from one particular angle on the ground, they visually align with the wing's internal structural spar, the main load-bearing beam running through the wing. That lets an inspector locate the exact structural checkpoint instantly, without blueprints, without guesswork. One glance up, triangle lines up, inspection point confirmed. It is the kind of elegant, invisible engineering that you walk past 100 times before someone tells you what it is. And speaking of the wing, there is hardware out there on it right now that most passengers will never notice, and it only matters in one very specific nightmare scenario. If a plane lands on water, the evacuation does not happen through the doors. Passengers exit onto the wing, and a wet, tilted wing surface with jet fuel potentially mixing into the water around it is one of the most dangerous surfaces a person can try to stand on. So engineers built in a solution. Yellow hooks near the wing's edge exist specifically to attach physical rope lifelines, giving evacuees something to grip while they wait for rescue on a surface that would otherwise send them sliding straight off into the water. That kind of detail is the thing that separates "we hope this works" from "we tested every failure mode and built a fix for each one." And the 90-second rule is the most famous example of that philosophy, and also the one with the most uncomfortable asterisks attached to it. Here is where I want you to stay with me, because this one is layered. In the early 1960s, research was conducted into the cause and development of fires after an aircraft crash. In April 1964, the FAA crash-tested a Douglas DC-7, and in September the same year, followed up with the crash test of a Lockheed L-1649. What they were measuring was how long a burning cabin stays survivable before what engineers call flashover, the point where heat builds to the level that it ignites almost everything in the cabin simultaneously. The answer they got was roughly 90 seconds. So that became the standard. For airplanes having a seating capacity of more than 44 passengers, it must be shown that the maximum seating capacity, including the number of crew members required, can be evacuated from the airplane to the ground under simulated emergency conditions within 90 seconds. So far, that sounds reasonable. Here is where it gets complicated. One of the most important criteria is that only 50% of emergency exits are available, simulating the rest being blocked by fire or wreckage. So the test already assumes a worst-case exit scenario. But then look at who is running the test. Critics argue it is not a realistic test. They are using groups of able-bodied people, with FAA tests using just 60 passengers. Flight attendant union leaders have stated they are concerned that current regulations for certification of the aircraft cabin don't reflect our real-world conditions. The test does not include passengers grabbing carry-on bags, which real evacuations consistently show people doing even when told not to. It does not fully account for the panic, the smoke, the disorientation. So the 90 seconds is real, and it is grounded in genuine fire science. But the number that gets certified is produced under conditions that critics argue bear little resemblance to a real, mixed-age, panicked plane load. That tension is unresolved, and it matters every time you fly. Now here is something that almost nobody connects to survival, and it happens on every single flight, right before takeoff and right before landing. The cabin lights dim. Most people assume it is for comfort, or to help you sleep, or just airline ambiance. The actual reason is physiological, and it is timed deliberately. It is pre-adapting your eyes to darkness in advance. In a real evacuation, if the lights fail and the cabin fills with smoke, the seconds your eyes need to adjust from a brightly lit interior to near total darkness could cost you the time you need to find an exit. Dimming the lights before the two highest risk phases of flight, takeoff and landing, means your eyes are already partially adjusted if something goes wrong the moment the wheels leave or touch the ground. And that same logic runs all the way down to the floor. The emergency lighting strips you see at ankle level are not just there because the ceiling lights might fail. They are positioned that low because evacuation research assumes you will be crawling, not walking. Smoke fills a cabin from the ceiling downward, so the survivable air layer during a fire is closest to the floor. The lighting is placed exactly where your eyes will be if you are doing what the research says you should be doing, which is staying below the smoke on your hands and knees. Every detail in that cabin is pointing at the same assumption. Something has gone wrong. Visibility is near zero, and you have seconds to move. Which brings us to the oxygen masks, and the detail that genuinely surprised me when I first went through the research on this. When those masks drop, the first thing most people notice is the instruction to put yours on before helping others. But the mechanism behind the mask itself is something almost nobody knows. It is not connected to an oxygen tank. The masks generate oxygen through a chemical reaction triggered when you pull the cord, and the supply runs for roughly 12 to 15 minutes. That sounds like a flaw until you understand what those 12 to 15 minutes are actually timed to. It is not meant to sustain you indefinitely. It is timed to last exactly as long as it takes a pilot to descend from cruising altitude to below 10,000 feet, where the air is breathable on its own. The chemical supply is not a limitation. It is a deliberate calculation. The mask does its job for precisely as long as the job needs to be done, and then the pilot has done theirs. Now, I told you at the start there was one feature I was saving for last, and this is it. The one that almost nobody on any flight realizes is there. Look at the cockpit windows next time you are boarding. Every window on a commercial aircraft is sealed, fixed, non-opening. Every window except two. The cockpit windows on most commercial aircraft are designed to open, and they come with something stowed right there in the flight deck, a knotted escape rope. If the aircraft is incapacitated on the ground, if the fuselage is compromised, if the main cabin becomes completely inaccessible, the pilots have a pre-planned escape route out of those windows and down the side of the aircraft using that rope. It is a rappelling system built into the most safety-critical part of the plane, and it is sitting there on every flight you have ever taken. The whole cabin is like this. Every triangle, every hook, every light strip, every chemical reaction in a plastic mask, every degree of dimness before takeoff. None of it is accidental. None of it is aesthetic. It is all the accumulated answer to a specific question someone asked after a specific thing went wrong. If this kind of deep dive is what you are here for, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the type of content we do on this channel. And if you want to keep going right now, there is a video sitting right there that goes just as deep on something else you have been looking at your whole life without knowing the full story. Go watch that one next. Drop a comment before you go, though. I want to know, which one of these surprised you the most? The brace position redesign? The oxygen mask timer? Or the cockpit rope? Because every time I run this topic, the answers are split almost perfectly three ways, and I genuinely want to see where this audience lands.